life in Togo, it's kind of like if you're living in like Chicago or New York, a little bit safer, like traffic-wise, because there's just nuts. The streets there's always traffic, motorcycles, lots of motorcycles. Like everybody had a motorcycle, or like from like World War I to like now, sort of like just tons of motorcycles. There are a couple of cars, but mostly taxis. And to get a ride, you'd have to barter. You'd have to haggle down the price, and it was kind of hard for me as a white person because it'd be like, well, you have money, so I'm just going to raise up the price. And it's like, okay, I've already went to this one place before, so I know I can get here for cheap. So come on, deal with me. Shopping, there's like a tiny shop, a general store, on every single like corner of a street. So if you like looking for food, you could find it really easily. There's all kinds of shops, like car shops, tailor shops. There's shops for everything on like one street or another. And every other little sector had their own like marketplace, this outdoor marketplace that you can go in and buy like vegetables from like farmers and meat from these meat places. And the biggest market was this place called Sigame. Huge jam-packed market. Like you're pretty much like at like a concert, but not even like at a concert. Like that's how packed it is. You're like trying to weave your way through human traffic, trying to get to like this one store. And so that's where we would go if we were like looking for souvenirs. And, like we later found out of this like awesome store that sold like American food, European food. So we'd go there mostly every Monday, one Monday a month to like get peanut butter, or like trying to reminisce, like get food to remind us of home and like make the sweet tooth in our mouths relive and have a good time. But other than that, it was hot all the time, humid all the time, just like kind of the weather it has been here, you know. So we slept with a fan on all the time. If you didn't do anything, you just sat down, you'd sweat. Like it just didn't require so much of you to sweat, so you'd have to drink a lot of water. Generally, Togo was pretty safe unless you were around election time. Then there'd be somewhat riots. But usually the south part of Togo, which is like on the border of the ocean, like that's the south part of Togo, because then there's like the ocean, then you go up like this hill, and that's where the rest of Lomé is. And so three of the areas you would serve in would be on the south side, and then the other four would be north, covering all of Lomé. So it was pretty big, but also pretty small at the same time. Pretty packed, jam-packed. Houses would like line up the streets, and you know, like I said, there's like a wall. Like yeah, pretty much like if you're looking down one street, like downtown U.S. street, your normal neighborhood, like just imagine like no yards whatsoever, like probably a road, take out the pavement and just have that dirt. Then you take like, you make all the houses one floor and just like this cement wall stretching from the corner of the block, the start of the block to the end of the block, and just like a door that leads into the property of the person. Usually they would live with their families. Like usually be a family-owned unit, but other than that, there'd usually be like a bunch of other like people living in this one unit. And so, you know, they're, like I said, you just open up the door to that, entering the complex area where like this is kind of like a courtyard in a way, like your front yard a bit, like smaller. And then like there'd just be doors around, and the rooms would be pretty small, like half the size of this room, or like your normal bedroom, half that size, with like a bed or like a TV and a table, maybe like another room leading farther in. But other than that, it was pretty small. You know, they kind of lived on what they needed, not like what they wanted. I would say that like the biggest industries, like there's a lot of European like gas and industries there. The only African Togolese industry that I can remember is like the cell phone place that was Togocell. And so that was like a main industry, as well as like another telephone company, which was called Move. And so those were two different cellular companies, like Verizon, Sprint, you have today. But there it was like a track phone based cell phone. You'd always have to buy X amount of minutes if you wanted to like message or talk to people. I think they also did have this beauty salon area. The beauty salon was mostly like for hair, for women's hair, because women would usually keep the hair really short. Generally men too. Like, you wanted your hair short, otherwise it would itch them, irritate them, and you'd sweat a lot. Women would have really short hair, and they would take this fake hair, and they would pretty much like sew it through their hair. In Lomé, on our mission, we had this one guy named President Blaise. He was a Togolese, and he worked for the church, mostly just kind of like find apartments and take care of the bills for the missionaries. But he was born and raised there, and I asked him this one question: like, is there any cultural stuff here in Lomé like to see, like museums or anything? And he's like, well, no, not really. There's not a whole lot of Togolese history, culture here. Like, if you go up north, way north, there will be, but other than that, there's like nothing to see. Granted, there was like this independence statue of independence, like when they got liberated from France or from French oppression, whatever, don't really know. Or the voodoo market that I told you about. Other than that, the most historic stuff, like landmarks, touristy places, are like up north or in Benin. Like, that's the places to go if you want to tour around. Other than there is Sissigame, which is this big market, like the biggest market in Togo. I don't think it's the biggest market in the world, but it is really big. I heard that like from Benin, people were harder to deal with. Like, they're more stubborn, because Togolese were laid back, carefree. Like, they'd be more accepting than the Beninese were. Other than that, that was like it. Like the system in Benin, they had like this other system of transportation. Like, it was more clear of who takes transport, like taxis and moto taxis. But in Togo, like, you can get a ride with like anybody as long as like you pay them. And there was a lot of Nigerians. A lot of missionaries would call Togo the second Nigeria, just because there's a lot of Nigerians there doing business, selling stuff.